I think I was gaslit into reading this book or something. Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Brittany. You should definitely subscribe to stay on my little cozy corner of the internet, and welcome back to Bookmas. Today I'm going to be going over some books that I think are either underhyped and deserve more love, appropriately hyped that I enjoyed so much, or books that I really did not like or think are overhyped. I will be doing 24 books for the year of 2024. Obviously. In this video, I'm not going to be going over every single book that I read this year because I'm at so far like 140 something books. I will actually be doing a whole separate video where I'm tier ranking every single book that I read this year, so look forward to that at the end of this year. So I did pick 24 today. It was very, very hard to pick 24 out of 140, by the way, like, let me just say that. But I did try to stick more with the whole theme of underhyped books and books that aren't as popular in my opinion. But a couple very, very popular books did slip in there, I'm not gonna lie. But they were just so good and I enjoyed them so much that I literally had to put them in this video. I do want to give a little disclaimer. I don't think this needs to be said, but just in case, let's just remember to keep everything in the comments and everything fun and positive, and just remember that reading is subjective. So if there's a book that I personally think was overhyped or I just did not like it, and you thought it was amazing, you thought it was a 5-star, I'm literally very happy for you, and I'm really glad that you got that experience from the book, and I'm a little jealous, to be honest. I think sometimes books just find you at the wrong time, and that's probably what happened to me with all of the books that I don't like, and vice versa. If there's a book that I love that you didn't like, it's the same thing, you know what I mean? So let's just keep it friendly and respectful in any comments or anything. These are going to be in no particular order. The only order that I do have is obviously the books that I liked and then the books that I didn't like. So we're going to start with the books that I loved first. I tried to split it up, but there was obviously way more books I love compared to the books I don't like. So majority of the 24 books on this list will be books I love, and then I think I have like 6 or 7 that I did not really like. We're just going to jump right into it. This will be a very long video. This will be a chatty video. To start us off, I do have The Seclusion by Jackie Castle. This book deserves so much more hype. This book is so good. This book is about America in the future. It's the year 2090 and America has walled itself off from the rest of the world. This book shows why that could be like a detrimental thing, or why this just might not be a good idea all around. It's very thought-provoking and leaves you with like this eerie feeling of, oh, could this be our future? This book follows our main character, Patricia, or Patch, what she goes by, and she's just doing her everyday life. She works for the government. She goes to work every single day. She follows all the rules. She has to do a ritual before she enters her house. She has to watch these mandatory 30-minute videos every single night from the government. And it all changes when her and her best friend Rex stumble upon a old van that has books in it from the past. So think like Shakespeare, Jane Austen, Charles Dickens, like all of the classics. And all of these books are banned, so this kind of just gets them questioning and wondering like, what else don't we know? Without revealing too much of the plot, they end up running away and just uncover more truths about how their whole life is completely different than what they thought it was. They run into a secret society and they just learn so much. I literally can't wait to read the second book. This was like one of the easiest 5 stars that I've ever given. I think it ticks off like all of the boxes for like a dystopian book. The second book that we do have that I truly enjoyed so much is Hot Summer by Elle Everhart. Again, I think this is a very underrated book. This is a sapphic romance between Ida and Cass. The company that Cass works for ends up having her be a contestant on a like dating reality TV show, kind of like Love Island, due to a partnership with the show and the company. And she has to work hard to remain a finalist on the show. It's kind of contingent to her getting a promotion. But her plan gets disrupted when she meets Ida, and she's like genuinely trying to get to know her and impress her and everything. It's just so enjoyable. Like, it literally felt like I was reading all of the behind the scenes from Love Island. Oh my gosh, it was so fun. I really, really recommend this if you're looking for a good sapphic romance that's just very fast paced. Up next, we do have Hollow Heathens. I think this one is starting to get more like attention, but I feel like people still aren't talking about it the way that they should be. I literally love the whole vibe and aesthetic of this book. It's very like spooky Halloween witchy vibes. So this follows Fallon and Julian. They are our main characters. Fallon receives a letter that states that her grandpa, her only living relative, needs help, so she goes back home to Weeping Hollow, which she was taken away from when she was younger. Then we have Julian, who is a member of the Hollow Heathens, and all 4 of them have to wear masks because if you look upon like their faces, a curse falls upon you that kills you by like your biggest fear. And this whole book kind of follows their romance, but also Fallon trying to find like where she belongs in this town, and Julian trying to break this curse so that way he can be with Fallon. It is so good. It is definitely a longer book. I think that's like one of the main complaints that people do have about it. I personally enjoyed it. I actually wouldn't even mind if it was longer. I ate it up. I devoured it. Alright, next we have A Not So Meet Cute by Megan Quinn. This one is definitely appropriately hyped. A lot of people, I feel like, know and talk about this one. But this book is just so funny. I don't think I ever laughed as hard as I have like reading a book than I did this one. It starts with Lottie, who is let go from her job. And like as a joke, her and her sister are hanging out and everything. And she's like just Googling how to have like a rich husband. So Lottie goes on a walk to kind of like jokingly find a rich husband and everything. Lo and behold, she runs into Huxley, who is our billionaire, and conveniently he needs a fake fiance to secure a partnership because he lied to this man saying that he has a fiance and she's pregnant and all this stuff, and now he's stressing and he's like, oh my god, I need somebody to like pretend to be my fiance. Eventually they do come to an agreement and they fake date, and oh my god, it is the funniest thing ever. Like the things that they have to do to prove that they're like together, oh my god, it's so funny. I think this is another one that is kind of in between underhyped and like appropriately hyped. Like I think it's starting to get more popular. I think it still deserves to be up there with like ACOTAR and Fourth Wing, and it's not. And that is The Serpent and the Wings of Night. When I tell you this book filled my romantasy void, it literally has everything to make like the perfect romantasy. This book follows our female main character, Araya. She was adopted when she was younger by the Vampire King, and she ends up entering in like this tournament competition to pretty much prove that she's like worthy of living among the vampires and not to, like, she doesn't want to be seen as weak and like prey. She has to compete against super powerful vampires. It's a deadly trial, and let's just say that there is a romantic interest that they kind of like team up and work together to get through this competition. There's a massive betrayal. There's, like I said, everything in the formula to make a perfect romantasy. I actually cannot wait to continue this series. Okay, this next one I had to include. Everybody and their mother knows about this book, or at least this author. This is definitely a very, very hyped up book, but I think it is hyped up for a reason. And that is Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas. I feel like honestly a lot of people don't like this one. It is very hit or miss because of the whole like urban fantasy, and there's a lot in this book with the whole world and the hierarchies and all of like the mythical beings and creatures and the names and the relations and the houses. Like this is a pretty intense book. Like I feel like I had to take notes in the beginning, and I was like looking up diagrams and stuff to figure out like the hierarchy levels and everything. But this book I think is gonna be up there with like God tier books. Oh my gosh, I think maybe one of the reasons I had such a good experience with this book is because I used the dramatized audiobook while I was reading it, so it kind of helped get everything into my head more. I wasn't like able to zone out as much, I guess, and the dramatized like aspect of it really, I don't know, made it feel like a movie. I don't know. But if you didn't like this book and you were thinking about giving it another chance, I would try doing the dramatized audiobook to see if that kind of helped. I think I cried like 3 or 4 times in this book. Like I'm not even kidding. I don't know. This book made me feel a lot of emotions with Danica and Bryce and everything. I don't really know how to like completely describe this book, but it follows Bryce Quinlan. She's just trying to like find her place, and her best friend is murdered. And that is not a spoiler because it's like literally in the synopsis. I just want to say, to me, it's like a murder, mystery, fantasy, romantasy. Like, it's just unlike anything that I've read, and I was hooked. Okay, going back to an underrated book, we do have The Divine Shallows by Alexandra Tran. First off, I'm just still obsessed with this cover. Every time I look at it, I'm like, this is the most beautiful cover I think I've ever seen on a book. This is a epic high fantasy. Like, there's a lot of world building and everything in this book, so if you're one that doesn't really like crazy world building and it's harder for you to like follow and understand the story, I probably would sit this one out, or really like make sure you have the time to fully digest it, because the first like I feel like 20% of this book is really setting up the series. This is going to be a 7-book series, so a lot needed to be set up. It starts with Illyria. I really hope I said her name right. It starts with her birth in the prologue and how she does not receive like the divine blessing from the moon god, which is a really, really big deal, especially for her family. Then we fast forward a couple years and we meet Eowyn, which is her sister. The book is mostly from her POV, so I think that threw a lot of people off. If you go into that kind of knowing that, it'll help a lot, because most of the story is showing her sister from her POV. So anyways, every 7 years, a candidate is selected for a 7-year trial. Can you imagine being in a trial for 7 years? And the winner of this trial that returns ends up getting a bunch of divine blessings and like higher status. So Illyria is chosen to be a candidate of this trial, even though she's been completely like shunned and disappointed and everything by her family due to the lack of the divine blessing. Like I said, it does get a little confusing because the book is kind of set up to be following Illyria, but it's from Eowyn's POV. But once you kind of have that down, it's such an enjoyable read, and you are following her through this trial, but also you're kind of following Eowyn during this time, and I don't know, it's just such a good fantasy book. I need the second book now, like give it to me, you know. Next we do have Nocticadia by Carrie Lake. This is another one that I think is more up and coming and getting more popular. If you're a Blue Lance fan, I think you would love this book. I think Professor Deverick gives very much like Lance Orion vibes, set in like an academy setting. This book centers around Lilia, who at a young age, she watches her mom die from like this mysterious illness that involves like parasites, and she kind of devotes all of her time trying to figure out what this parasite and this illness is, and no one believes her. They think she's crazy about what she saw that night. Fast forward a couple years, she gets an invite to Dracadia University, and this is where we meet Professor Deverick, and he's actually studying these parasites. She kind of realizes like, oh my god, like this is a real thing, this is, you know, how my mom died, I'm not crazy, yada yada, and she just kind of like makes it her mission to work with him. It's definitely like a slow burn romance. It's professor student, and there's just a lot that happens in this book that's just so good. It's a really good read for like the fall time or like around Halloween. Next we do have Say You Swear by Megan Brandy. I think this book again does not receive the recognition that it deserves. Like people talk about it, but there's only a select group of people who like this book or have read this book. Maybe that's just like, maybe I'm just not seeing it as much on my end of like TikTok and Instagram and everything. Maybe it is like super hyped up and I'm just not realizing it. The main thing I have to say about this book is Noah Riley, the man that you are. This book breaks your heart and puts it right back together a couple times, to be honest. I feel like explaining this one's a little harder because I don't want to spoil any part of this plot, and there's like a pretty big thing that happens in this book that's really not even on the synopsis or anything, and I don't want to give that away. But what I can say about this book is our main character, Ariana, she is in love with her brother's best friend, and things happen and he pretty much tells her like this was a mistake, and she goes through her first life of college just really depressed and everything until she meets Mr. Noah Riley. There's just a really good like friend group, found family situation going on. The love in this book is so sweet. There's kind of maybe a little bit of like a love triangle. Not maybe, there's definitely like a love triangle. I'm just gonna leave it at that. This is such a good book, and this is another one of those books where it's like long and people are like, oh, it's too long, but me, I'm like, I wish it was longer. Jumping over to the psychological thriller side of things, we do have The Wrong Daughter by Dandy Smith. This book infuriated me, but in the best possible way. And I think that's kind of like the whole point of a psychological thriller, and that's kind of how you know that it's done right, if you feel like you're going crazy and insane right there with the characters. So this book follows Caitlin. When she's younger, she watches her sister literally get taken by a masked man in the night. Fast forward 16 years later, Olivia randomly returns out of nowhere back to the family, and it's just being really vague and not wanting to talk about what happened, who had her, etc. Caitlin starts becoming very suspicious that this is not her sister and that it's someone pretending to be her, and she's just trying to figure out like who this girl is and why. But at the same time, there's like a dual narrative, and we also are reading about Eleanor and Heath. At first, I was like not liking that because you would get into one of like their timelines and then it would like switch up to the next person and you're like, what the heck? Like it would just kind of take you out of the story. But I will say, like, eventually they connect and the connection is crazy. There's so much manipulation in this book and like mystery and constantly like having you questioning things. I had to like literally, this is so probably embarrassing, but I had to get up and start like pacing my room and doing laps sometimes because I would like get so stressed out while reading this book because the manipulation was crazy. I was like, oh my god, I can't do this. And then I would just keep reading. Like at first I thought this was gonna be a 2-star book. And I guess the further I got into it, I was like, oh, this is such a good book. And yeah, so now here I am sitting in front of you talking about this book that I loved. Up next, we do have Goldson by Evelyn Knight. This is another really cool cover. I'm like obsessed with it. This book was so good. If you're a dark romance person, I think you would eat this book up easily. Like I literally need the second book already. So we have our female main character, Aurelia, and she's just like the definition of like a bad bitch with like some feminine rage. And then we have Julian, who is our main male character. He is the brother of her ex-boyfriend, also her childhood best friend, and he's just very unhinged in like a touch her and you die type of way. This book has secret societies. It gives off like dark mafia vibes and people, unalive people. It's so fun. Is fun the right word? It's very good. That's all I'm gonna say. I definitely think you should read this. No, I know you should read this. Okay, this next book is kind of a given considering I quite literally cannot shut up ever about this book. And technically it's a series, and we're gonna include the whole series as like one book in this video. And that is, oh my god, who can guess it? Boys of Tommen. Yes, obviously. Obviously. This series holds such a special place in my heart. I am including the whole series because I can't pick a favorite, because Binding and Keeping 13 I love for one reason, and Saving and Redeeming 6 I love for a whole separate reason. Like, they're obviously connected, like they're kind of around the same timeline, but also in my head they're two different books. I can't explain it. Like, I love them both equally, and like I can't pick between Joey or Johnny or Shannon or Aoife. Like, I cannot pick between them because I love them all for their own reasons. And it is what it is. If for some reason you don't know what Boys of Tommen is about, so this follows the Lynch family, and they do not have like an easy life. Their dad is just a super like abusive alcoholic. The first two follow Shannon, and she's pretty much getting super bullied at school. Like, I don't just mean like name calling, I mean like physically assaulted and everything. Like, this poor girl has to deal with it at school, at home. Like, your heart breaks for her at least 7 times a chapter. She ends up transferring to a new school, and this is where she meets Johnny, and she gets hit on the head with a rugby ball on the first day of school. So then you're kind of just reading about them kind of falling in love, but also her home life, and just, it's so much trauma, but like, oh my god, it's just such a good book. And then at the same time we have Joey in Saving and Redeeming 6. So while all of this is happening in like Binding and Keeping 13, we also have this other timeline with Joey in Saving and Redeeming 6 that starts a little bit before this one, kind of. And it kind of is showing how he is pretty much the one that's keeping the family together along with Shannon, but he's kind of taking most of like the brunt from his dad and everything, and he's like fighting back and all of this. He ends up getting addicted to drugs, and you are just kind of like reading him struggle and go through this addiction, and it's so heartbreaking. And then you meet Aoife, and she just is like trying to do everything she can to be there for him. And oh my god, these books have literally, I can't even count how many times that these books have made me cry. I know I've said that already about like 7 different books. I'm a big sap. It is what it is. But these books will literally tear you apart and put you back together every other page. I'm not even kidding. We're almost done with the books I loved. I have a couple more, and then we'll get into the books I didn't like. But up next we do have Lo-Fi by Liz Riggs. This is another one of those books that people either loved or they hated, and there's kind of nothing in between. But I really enjoy this book. I didn't go into it expecting like much. That's kind of how I go into every book. You know, I don't like having predetermined opinions really on books. So I went into it not expecting anything, and I left with just like a really good like coming of age type story, but for an adult, I guess, if that makes sense. I genuinely believe that the people who hated this book have just like never felt what it's like to struggle in your 20s, trying to like navigate your life and everything and figure out like who you are and what you're doing with your life. And a lot of people don't like it because she also kind of has like an alcohol addiction, but people don't realize that that's such a common issue, especially for people in their 20s. Like, it's a common issue in general, but I feel like a lot of people in their early 20s use alcohol and drugs and stuff as an escape. And this is just a very like real, honest book. I feel like she was very realistic and I found myself rooting for her the entire time. But this book follows Al, who recently moved to Nashville. She works as like a door girl at like a music club type thing, and she's an aspiring songwriter. So she's trying to navigate her life and her romance aspect of her life while also trying to work up the nerve to be able to perform her music. I just feel like this really shows the struggles that she is facing while trying to navigate this part of her life, but also her romance aspect. And I feel like it's done in such a real way with like hookup culture and how it's not always like straightforward when you're trying to find romance in your life, like where you meet someone and he's immediately in love with you. It's just very honest and real, and I really appreciated this book like for that. So we have The Cruel Prince. Obviously this one is hyped up for a good reason, but honestly I think it needs to be hyped up more because a lot of people still don't like this book, and I think that's because they go into this book expecting it to be like this epic like romantasy where it's just gonna be like Jude and Carden falling in love. It's not that. I think it needs to be marketed more as just a fantasy or even like a political fantasy, and I think people going into that, they would be able to enjoy it more expecting that instead. Jude is one of my favorite like female heroines. I think she's literally a bad bitch. She literally microdoses like poisoning herself every single day. Is that not like insane? I love her. I literally love her. This book follows Jude, who when she was younger, she was taken into the fairy realm with her sisters after her parents were, and now that she's older, she's just trying to navigate through like the politics of the high court and just kind of like find her place in this realm and protect her sister. So good. And then we have Carden, who's just Carden. He's the prince and he's, oh my gosh, insane. Literally, I think this is a really good enemy to lover type book, but the romance doesn't actually start happening more further into the series. So like I said, don't go into this one if you haven't read it yet expecting a crazy romance in this one. This one is more about building like the political aspect of it and the world and just kind of show more Jude. Alright, you know I had to include this book because I have a literal tattoo of it, so obviously this is going to be like high up on my list. So this is a retelling of Achilles and Patroclus and more about like their romance. So if you are wanting more of like the war side of all of that, I would just read the Iliad and you'd probably like that, because a lot of the negative reviews on this, people were just mad that it focused on the romance between Achilles and Patroclus and not like the actual like war, but there was still a lot of other stuff in this, so I don't know, I think they were just mad that it was two men kissing. Sorry, just saying. But this is a story of ego and greed and glory and love, and oh my god, I love this book so much. I'm gonna say it, this book made me cry a couple times. I think almost all of these books apparently have made me cry. It's really easy for me to get like wrapped into the emotions of books. I just like, I don't know, I guess I just really connect with the characters and the world and everything. Like I feel like I know them, so when bad things or good things happen to them, I just cry. I cry. I don't know. Two more books I loved and then we're moving on. Up next we do have Era of Stardust and Secrets by C.C. Hartley. I was so grateful to actually receive a physical copy of this book before it was released, but that obviously did not sway my opinion because I'm gonna be honest, if I like a book or I don't like it. I think this was such a good like debut romantasy, and I think this is really good for Sarah J Maas, specifically like ACOTAR fans. It's heavily inspired by that, but it's also its own story. I love the female main character in this book, and I love that I couldn't figure out like who the actual love interest was in this book until further on, and even then I'm still questioning who the love interest is after finishing this book, because I feel like it could maybe be like a little Tam situation, but also I don't know. So this book follows Nyleria, who's kind of always just lived in the shadows with her best friend, and he ends up leaving and tragedy kind of strikes her family. She ends up in King Thaddeus's kingdom. He's like the king of, I guess, the human realm where she lives, but he discovers that she has like this ancient dormant magic, and they're trying to like train and figure out how to unleash this magic and get her to control it and use it, because there is like this long-standing rivalry between the humans and the Fae, and her magic is kind of like the key to everything. So they end up getting invited to Solstice by the Fae. A bunch of stuff goes down, and the way this book ended just literally had me like foaming out the mouth for the next book. All right, the last book of the loved list. This one is one of those books where as I was reading it, I was like, I think this is not going to be that great of a book. But then by the end of it, I was like, I was addicted to this book and I could not stop thinking about it. And whenever I wasn't reading, I like thought about reading it. So therefore I had to include it in this video. And that is House of Ash and Shadow. I will say this book is written very YA and kind of like juvenile and everything. So again, don't go into this expecting crazy high epic fantasy. It's very like to the point, but I literally think this deserves more love because I could not stop thinking about this book for some reason. Like I just kept wanting to pick it up and keep reading it. I think the characters were pretty likable, and the whole world that's like set up was very like interesting, and the magic, all of it is just very intriguing, I guess, that kept me wanting to read. This book follows 17-year-old Fallon, who is born with a curse that if anybody touches her, it causes her excruciating pain. So she's kind of accepted like, I'm never gonna be touched in my life, kissed, I can't even hug my own father, etc. And then one day her father falls very ill, and she's just determined to do anything to save him. So she ends up breaking into the Gilded City. So it's kind of more like highborn and lowborn type situation. The Gilded City is where like the highborn are, and they're the ones who are like more magical and everything. She ends up meeting a healer. His name is Orion. I probably said that wrong, oh my god. But he comes back with her to heal her father, and in the process of the chaos of like trying to heal her father, he ends up touching her, and they realize, hey, he can touch her. She ends up getting an invitation to attend this school in the Gilded City because they kind of want to like keep an eye on her and train her and teach her how to actually use her magic, because of the family that she's from is actually the family of like a very dark, powerful like sorceress, and she's got a bunch of like dark magic within her. So everyone's kind of like hesitant about her. They don't like her. She's just seen as like a threat to everybody. And I don't know, I just think this was such a good book. I haven't read the second one yet, but I just feel like it's gonna be really good. The way this one ended, I think I've said this about every single one of these books, but they all just ended so good that made me obsessed, I guess. I'll definitely be reading the second one soon. We are done with the ones that I liked. Let's move on to the couple that I didn't like. I promise we are almost done with this video. Oh my god. So just because I am including these books in this portion where I'm like thinking they're overrated, overhyped, or it was not for me, it doesn't necessarily mean that I hated the book. Just to like clarify, like I don't wish death upon this book, but it's more like I expected more from this and was kind of like disappointed, or maybe it's like a book I DNF'd, or just other like little things like that. So starting off maybe a little bit controversial. Please don't hate me when I say this. The first book that I'm gonna put on this list is actually Spark of the Everflame by Penn Cole. I wanted to love this book so bad. I literally went into this book like, this is gonna be a 5-star. I genuinely cannot wait. I heard that this is like such an amazing series. Like I was so excited about this book. You don't even understand. This book follows DM, who is a healer in the mortal world, and her mother goes missing. So she's kind of starting to like investigate and try to understand what happened to her mother, and she ends up discovering all of these like secrets about herself and her past, and she's thrown into a world of descended royalty and forbidden romance. This was a 3.75 for me, so that's still a good rating to me. I'm just including it in this portion because, again, I think it was maybe a little overrated because I was expecting a 5-star from it. I do hear it gets a little better as the series continues. I just haven't decided if I plan on continuing it yet because of the way this one left me feeling. And I do hear that DM kind of gets a little more annoying, so I don't know. I just felt like the plot kind of skipped around too much and left a lot of like plot holes. And I understand there's more like books in the series, so some of those plot holes are probably answered further into the book, but there was just so many things that I was like, why? But I am curious about the love interest and like their romance, so I'm going back and forth. I'm not like completely cutting it out of my life, but I just think I have a bunch of other books that I really want to read that I want to prioritize, so maybe eventually I'll get to that one, you know? Next we do have Immortal Dark. This one was actually a DNF for me. I believe at 40% I DNF'd it. I might eventually give this one another go in about a year, like maybe around next fall Halloween. As of right now, it was just not for me, and I was really disappointed because it seemed like everything in this book was something that I love in my books. So this book follows Kidan, I definitely said that wrong, and she grew up away from the society that she was born into, where bloodlines kind of gain like power through companionship with vampires. Her sister goes missing, and I believe her family was killed or something like that, and she believes that the vampire who was bound to her family is the one responsible for this. And I believe she ends up living with this vampire, and I don't really know what happens from there because, like I said, I did DNF this book. So let me know if you guys ended up loving this and if I should give this another try. I didn't really care for the main character, and I couldn't find myself like getting into it. Like, it kind of felt like a chore picking the book back up every single time. I think this might just be one of those books that found me in a time that I wasn't like in the mood for it. Going back to thrillers, we do have You Shouldn't Have Come Here by Geneva Rose. This was one of those books where reading it, I was like, oh, this is gonna be like a 4-star book. This was so good until I got to like the last 20-30%, and then I was like, oh, I don't like this anymore. It ended up just becoming very disappointing. Like, the whole ending I hated. It definitely knocked the rating down, and I was just like, wow, I wish I just stopped halfway through this book. I don't know, that might be kind of dramatic. This book follows Grace, who is from New York, and she ends up renting like an Airbnb on this ranch in Wyoming because she just wants an escape from life. But when she gets there, she ends up meeting the owner of this ranch, Calvin, and I guess he's not what she was expecting. He's very handsome, yada yada. And he ends up getting infatuated with her. There's a lack of cell phone service. There's a girl that's missing, and just weird things kind of happening. And she kind of just has like this feeling that something isn't right with the town. Well, fast forward, and they end up kind of like starting to fall for each other. There's a little bit of a romance aspect in this book. So I was like, oh, well, that's kind of cool. Like a thriller book that also has like this romance aspect. Like, I was kind of into it. And then we got like closer to the ending, and I was like, ugh, I don't like this. It was more like just neutral to me, so I'm putting it in like this whole disappointed section because I just was expecting so much more from it. The Teacher by Frida McFadden. First off, I think I was gaslit into reading this book or something because like all of you guys who said that this is the best thriller, psychological mystery, whatever that you've ever read, you better count your days because what was this? And like, I feel like this kind of like turned me off from wanting to read any of her other books because I was like, what the heck? Like, the way people were talking about this, I was expecting to be like shocked and just, I was expecting this to be amazing. I did not feel that way about this book. And I do hear her other books are way better. When I was like reading reviews, a lot of people did say that they love her books and that this one was not their favorite either. So it kind of made me feel a little better, like, okay, so it's not just me. I did not like this book. Besides the fact that it just creeped me out because the girl in this book is like 16 and the guy is like 30 or 40 or something, and her teacher. Like, don't get me wrong, I love an age gap. I love a whole professor-student type thing, but not a 16-year-old girl. But I digress. Anyways, this book follows Eve and Nate, but also another character, Addie. Eve and Nate are teachers at Addie's school, and the prior year there was this rumor going around with this like student-teacher affair with Addie and another teacher that got fired. So Eve is already immediately like suspicious of her. She thinks that she started all of it and that she's lying and she just wanted to get him fired and all of this stuff. So she already just does not like this girl. Then she becomes suspicious because Nate ends up taking a liking to her because they like the same poems and everything. And the whole thing is just weird. And then there's a whole other aspect thrown in with Eve and her romance life and shoes, and I didn't think the plot twists were jaw-dropping amazing. Like, I just think it wasn't for me. I'll eventually read another book by her, but it's gonna take some time, and I gotta make sure I pick like the right one, because if I read another book by her that I hate, then I'm gonna be like, you know what, no. So if you have a favorite book by her that you think is absolutely amazing, let me know, because maybe I'll give it a chance. Up next, we do have The Risk by Elle Kennedy. I didn't like hate this one, but out of every like hockey romance or sports romance that I read, this would not even be like on my top 5 or even top 10. This book was just very like meh to me, and I do like Elle Kennedy. I like her other books, but this one just did not do it for me. And the whole like trope is fake dating, and supposed to be like rival to lover, kind of, I guess, technically. And it did not give that because fake dating was for like a page. And then immediately he was like, I am in love with her. So this book follows Brenna, who is the daughter of the head coach for Briar U's hockey team, and she ends up fake dating Jake Connolly, who is on the hockey team of the rivalry team for Briar U. Kind of like rivals, but not really, like I said, because she's just the daughter of the coach, so I feel like it's literally not even that big of a deal, but whatever, I guess. And she does all of this because she's trying to impress this misogynistic man that she's trying to work for. Don't know why she would want to work for him. Like, I get that it opens up all of these opportunities, but oh my god, he was like a terrible man. So they fake dated for like one date, and then he immediately was like, go on a real date with me, like, oh my god, I need her for the rest of my life. And I was like, well, there goes that fun slow burn that I was expecting. And I was expecting heavy banter because of the beginning of this book. They had like a good banter, and again, it lasted like 5 pages, and then I was like, what the heck? It's not that it was like objectively bad or anything, it just is probably like my least favorite hockey romance that I've read. This next book made me so angry. Fall of Ruin and Wrath. I wanted to love this book so bad. I think this book took me like 2 months to read. That might be dramatic. It might have only been like 1 month, but I heard such good things about Miss Jennifer, and I literally have From Blood and Ash sitting on my shelf right now, and now I'm scared to read it because I was like, what is this? This book literally felt like scraps from a bunch of other fantasy books, all just kind of like thrown in here and turned into a book. And I know I'm not the only one that thinks that because I've seen other reviews that said that too. I don't know why I always feel like I have to justify with you guys, like whenever I don't like a book, when I'm like, other people said it too. And the crazy thing is, like, the first 20% of this book, I was like, this is gonna be so like cool and good, and I loved like the concept of it. And then slowly I was like, I think we lost the plot. I was like, I don't actually know what's going on at all. And like every couple like pages there would be something like good that happened, so I was like just trying to push through because I was like, okay, whatever, let me just like suck up the bad parts and get to like the good parts. But it was just too much. It was another book that just felt like a chore picking up. This book follows Callista, who is born with this amazing intuition that never fails her, and she ends up living with this baron in exchange for her safety. She kind of helps like guide him with her intuition. And one night she follows this intuition and ends up saving a highborn from pretty much being like tortured and about to be killed. And this is Prince Thorn, who is the love interest, I think, in this book. That's how at least it seemed like it was going. And he like feeds off pleasure. Like that's how he like replenishes his magic, I guess. And I guess there's like a rebellion, and I don't really know what else kind of happens in this book because, like I said, I lost the plot. I started not understanding what was happening at all. So sorry. Oh my god, I always just feel so bad like saying anything bad about a book. And the last book, we have made it to the last book of this video. That is God Killer. This is another one that I really wanted to be good, and I should stop saying that because all of these books, obviously, I wanted to be good. That was kind of the whole point of me reading them. Why would I read a book that I think is bad? 80% of this book just felt like we were walking or like traveling to this city. That's like all I remember from the book. I didn't connect with the characters literally at all. I feel like the romance was very random. Like it was thrown in the most random parts where something would happen and then it'd be like, oh, they're making out. That's crazy. What happened? This book follows Kissin, who is a god killer after her entire family gets killed by gods. And she ends up finding a god that she cannot kill. It's a god of white lies because this god is connected with this girl, and if the god dies, the girl dies, so they're like somehow connected. So they end up traveling to this ruined city, which is where the last of the gods reside. And they're also traveling with this knight who's on his own mission, and they kind of in a way group together, I guess. I don't know, like the whole plot sounded like it would be this amazing book about this girl just like slaying gods left and right and like help save this girl and everything. And I was like, oh my god, this is gonna be so cool. And I got like none of that, and I guess I just didn't click with it, so did not like that one. We have reached the end of this video. I do hope that you guys got some good book recommendations. A lot of those books I loved, I feel like are very underrated, and I really think you should check them out because a lot of them are like smaller authors, and hopefully I didn't make anyone super mad when I was talking about the books I didn't like. Sorry if one of those books are your favorite. Again, maybe they just found me at the wrong time. Maybe I'll give them another read and kind of see how I feel in the future. Go ahead and subscribe and hit the bell button next to that little subscribe button. That way you're notified whenever I do post. And give this video a thumbs up, pretty please. And I will see you guys tomorrow for the next day of Bookmas. Bye.